Welcome back to True Crime with the Bad Girl and the Playa. I am Benny Scala, the Playa, and I'm here as always with my partner in crime, the Boston Bad Girl, the delightful Brittany Brown. And hopefully everybody had a good Thanksgiving. Me personally, I turned my cheat day into a 4-day food bender, but I'm happy to say I'm back in the gym this morning, and I'm going to go back to my diet of kipper snacks and shredded wheat. Brittany, how about you? How was your Thanksgiving?
Oh, it was fine. Just another day here, hanging out with my dog, and I can see yours. Hello,
Oh,
Bree.
yeah, we're always joined as always by Bree, the crime dog, the new crime dog.
The new crime dog. Yep, we
She's
got to
a
get her
little
a
bored
cape.
today.
She needs to have a cape because she's a superhero now.
Absolutely, yeah, like Nikki Ash, almost a superhero.
Right.
So good Thanksgiving. Not totally off the diet.
Oh, just another day to me. We cooked a chicken and that was it.
Oh, okay, all right. Then you don't have anything to atone for.
Exactly.
Unlike me. You know, it's really funny. I remember one time I was on the treadmill at Planet Fitness for like 45 minutes, and you see it shows you the calories burned.
Yeah.
And I think it was like 375 calories. And I thought, well, I actually went to McDonald's for a Diet Coke because I was thirsty, but it was breakfast time, and I looked at the McGriddle, I guess it's called,
Yeah.
and I think they have the calorie information, and it was like 380 calories, and I'm thinking I could probably eat that maybe 4 bites in maybe 2 minutes. So
Right.
like it takes me 2 minutes to eat something that would take me 45 minutes to burn off.
Right.
And at that moment, life was just very unfair. It should be the other way around.
It absolutely should. I second that opinion.
Eat for 45 minutes and then walk around the block, and then you can eat for 45 more minutes.
There you go.
I'd much rather do that. Well, my fellow true crime junkies, today we're going to talk about one of the most shocking crimes in American history, I think. On November 13th, 1974, Ronald DeFeo, also known as Butch to his family and friends, at around 3 in the morning at their house, brutally murdered his mother, father, and 4 younger siblings at their home in Amityville, New York. And now later that evening, DeFeo entered Henry's pub in Amityville, New York, and declared, "You've got to help me. My mother and father have been shot." And what happened? Several of the patrons accompanied DeFeo to his house at 112 Ocean Avenue, which was literally, within walking distance of the bar. And I'll get into that in a second. But one of DeFeo's very close friends called the Suffolk County Police Department, who they found all 6 family members dead in their beds. And Brittany, now you were probably a very young child in Scituate, Massachusetts, several states away when this happened. Do you have any recollection of this?
I never heard of it until the movie came out. Never.
Oh.
Imagine.
When did the first movie come out? Do you know? Do you remember?
I want to say 79.
Okay. So like 5 years later.
Yeah, 5 years later. That's the first time I ever heard of it.
Okay, and this I have to plead in ignorance on, or innocence, but there was more than one, correct?
Yes, there was another one remake in 2005.
Okay,
Yeah.
All righty. Yeah, I've seen none of that. I guess now that we've done this, I might backtrack, and now that I know what I know about the whole situation, I'd probably, with a little bit more perspective, I might just do that. But, it's really ironic that our very first True Crime episode was about the Boston Strangler, which was literally in your backyard.
Right.
And now this one's in mine because I grew up in Farmingdale, Long Island. And according to Google Maps, my house at 142 Intervale Avenue in Farmingdale was literally 4.3 miles away from the Ocean Avenue, Massachusetts side of the murder. And now my brother-in-law, John Wendell, was the bartender on duty at Henry's pub when DeFeo burst in that evening. I actually had the chance to talk to him this afternoon for about 10, 15 minutes. And actually, it's a funny story because John was at his apartment and smoking some marijuana. The police knock on the door. It's police. And he's thinking, oh, crap, I'm busted. And they walk in and they say, we want to ask you about Ronald DeFeo. And they said, don't worry, we're not going to talk about that thing, which was like, the whole place reeking of pot. But he actually said that, not only did DeFeo come in at 6 in the evening, but he was there a couple of times during the day, which effectively blew his alibi that he was working at his dad's. Oh, you want to get down? All right, you can get down. I'm sure you're going to make a run in that soon enough. So now I have quite the vivid imagination, but I just can't stretch it far enough to imagine like what would possess someone to brutally murder their entire family. I think DeFeo was 23, and he worked. I'm not sure if it was a body shop or a dealership. I watched a couple of different documentaries, and one said body shop, one said dealership. I asked my brother-in-law; he wasn't sure either. But Ronald Sr., the dad, reportedly had a very kind of explosive temper and a forceful personality, and Junior and Senior frequently butted heads, which, I mean, that's not much different than, many fathers and sons. But Junior was also reportedly heavily involved in both drugs and definitely alcohol, because we knew that he was at the bar. I can see you losing your temper and taking your anger out on your abusive father. Although, I mean, thank God I'm kind of naive to that stuff. My dad was a great guy. But what I don't understand is, you got two younger brothers who were 12 and 9. Brittany, how could someone, I mean, how does somebody get to this point in life?
Oh my God. I can't believe it. I mean, we've all gotten mad. We've all, maybe keyed someone's car or, flattened a tire or something like that. I've never done that.
But even through a telephone, maybe punched a hole in the wall. But you're taking your anger out on an inanimate and unliving object.
I can't understand how you could kill your own anyone but your own family. And like you said, two younger brothers. Isn't that unbelievable?
Well, I mean, there's been even, I guess, Marvin Gaye, the great singer, got murdered by his father. I think on Father's Day they had a squabble, and the father shot him. But then the father didn't go on a rampage and kill the rest of the family. So I mean, I with a stretch, I could see maybe him doing that to his dad. But then you kill 5 other people in your family. Well, why?
It's crazy. I can't understand. He had to have some underlying issues.
Oh, absolutely.
Had to.
And we're gonna get into that too. So, DeFeo's taken into custody by the Suffolk County PD. You have Suffolk County in Mass, don't you?
Yes.
Or you have a city named Suffolk, don't you?
No, it's county.
It is a county. All right.
Yeah.
And so initially they took him in for his own protection. And I watched a news clip, and they said he is not considered a suspect or a person. I mean, how do you not consider it? I mean, if there's 7 people dead and there's 1 person alive in the family, nobody's that lucky. But yeah. Now he initially suggested that a mob hitman named Louis Fellini, good old Louis Fellini, was responsible. I mean, with a name like that, I mean, I'm charging the guy already with 6 murders, Louis. But no, he did confess, and he said, once I started, I couldn't stop it. It went so fast. So now Brittany is going to talk about the trial and conviction, but after that, we're going to really try to peel back this very complicated onion.
Absolutely. My goodness. So his trial began on October 14th, 1975. His lawyer issued a not guilty by reason of insanity plea, typical, and claimed that DeFeo killed his family in self-defense. That's a good one, huh? In response to the voices in his head. Now, that makes me a little bit nervous about Randy Orton.
Yeah, he's been hearing voices in his head for 12 years.
Yeah, it makes me a little nervous.
Yeah, and he's back now too.
He's back, and geez, the next pay-per-view, we better watch out.
Right.
So this argument was supported by Ronald's psychiatrist, and the psychiatrist for the prosecution argued that although DeFeo was a heavy user of LSD and heroin, oddly enough, just like Charles Manson.
Right, I imagine that.
Yeah, and was suffering from an antisocial personality disorder, he was aware of his actions at the time of the crime. So on November 21st, 1975, he was found guilty of 6 counts of second-degree murder. Judge Thomas Stark sentenced DeFeo to 6 sentences of 25 years to life and said that the crimes were the most heinous murders committed in Suffolk County since its founding. He was held at the Sullivan Correctional Facility in Fallsburg, New York, until his death, March 21st, 2021, so just a couple years ago. at the age of 69. All of his appeals and requests to the parole board were exhausted. Now, Benny, this murder, ghastly as it was shredded in controversy on many counts. Why don't you start with the crime itself?
Yeah, I'll do that, Brittany. But one quick sidetrack, and I'd like to hear the whole insanity versus sanity. Now, me, like, I'm thinking, if you killed 6 of your family members, how could you possibly be sane? That's
Right.
where I struggle with the whole sane versus insane, because I can't imagine. I mean, like I said, we're both fairly normal people. I mean, some people question my sanity, but I mean, in a million years, I could never ever think of like laying a finger on, especially when I was younger, on my parents in anger, and like I can't make that leap. I can't. I don't see how somebody could be considered sane and yet do something that atrocious. What do you feel?
I feel exactly the same way. I mean, like I said, I've been my sister and I had horrible fights, but nobody wanted to kill anybody. I mean, I don't understand. You have to be not sane to do that.
Yeah, that's what I don't get. But yeah, we're talking about 49 years ago. Maybe maybe if it was done, if the trial happened today, maybe they'd come up with a different outcome. Who knows? But this is really where, as far as peeling back the onion of the crime, what I can't wrap my arms around. So there was no evidence of drugs being administered, but everybody was found face down in their beds without, and it was confirmed they were not moved. There was no sign of a struggle, but yet there was no evidence of drugs being administered. And although DeFeo at one point, one of his 4,000 stories said he did, and there was no silencer on the rifle. I mean, common sense would say that if after the first shot was fired, that the rest of the family would have woken up and just as an instinct would have ran away from the gunfire. And even the neighbors, I've driven past that house many times, and I was telling you off air that I had a fraternity summer house 2 years later in Lindenhurst, Long Island, in 1976. 2 years, so the crime was still fairly fresh to where like that house was an attraction. And the route that I had to take, I drove past that pub. They had changed the name to, I think it was Pastime Pub, but you make and it was on the intersection of Route 110 and Montauk Highway. And when you made that left onto Montauk Highway, the very first right was Ocean Avenue, and but it was a quiet neighborhood, but I would not. I mean, the houses, kind of like probably Boston. I mean, the houses aren't far apart. I mean, they're fairly close together.
Yeah.
So you would, I mean, common sense would say that a neighbor would have heard a gunshot. No, the only thing that any of the neighbors heard was their dog barking right around 3:00 in the morning. And now I was talking to my sister actually while I was talking to my brother-in-law, and she brought up a good point though. How good, I mean, there was no such thing as forensics back then, no DNA, no. I would think, even like the testing for drugs, you were talking 49 years ago, had to be pretty primitive. Maybe he administered something that was not traceable, that rendered these people helpless, because what's the chances of everybody being found in the exact same position?
Yeah.
And not having woken up with, I mean, supposedly it was a fairly loud rifle. In fact, I think when I was watching one of the documentaries, one of the police officers said that typically you could hear something like that like 4 or 5 blocks away.
Oh, wow.
So yeah, I mean, it's not a quiet gun. So I don't know. I just, and like we just said, DeFeo's story changed more times than I changed my underwear. So at first he claims that his younger sister Dawn killed the father, and their distraught mother then in turn killed all the siblings. Now, I mean, I absolutely cannot wrap my arms around like a mom killing their own children like that. I mean, the mom who was, probably one of the most saner persons in the family. And then DeFeo also claimed that he was married and living in New Jersey with a woman named Geraldine Gates, and returned to Amityville at the prompting of the mother to break up a fight between Ronald Sr. and the oldest daughter, Dawn. And I mean, that would be a great alibi. if you just don't you ignore the fact that the DeFeo and Gates didn't meet until I think the mid '80s. So I mean, it's a small fact, right?
Yeah, just a little bit.
So in 1990, so that was 16 years after the shooting, DeFeo filed a 440 motion, which I'm not a lawyer. I mean, we're not lawyers, psychiatrists. We're just fans of true crime. But it's a proceeding to have his conviction vacated. And in this one, he claimed that his younger sister Dawn, the oldest girl, and I mean the second oldest child, and an unknown assailant killed the parents. The assailant fled, and then Dawn killed the siblings. And then DeFeo claimed that he accidentally killed Dawn in a struggle over the rifle. And he also asserted that he was married to Geraldine Gates, and he was with her brother at the time of the killings. So that would be a great alibi, except for the fact that at the time, Geraldine Gates was married with somebody else, to somebody else, and living in upstate New York. So, my opinion, the only thing about the number 440 is the pounds of bullshit that DeFeo was slinging.
Yeah.
And, now if the story ended here, still be quite the story, quite the doozy. I mean, geez, right. Guy kills 6 of his family members, but it goes on. And which really makes it probably why we're talking about it now. So on December 18th, 1975, the house on Ocean Avenue was purchased by the Lutz family, George and Kathy. And Kathy had 3 younger children from a prior marriage. They were in the house for a grand total of 28 days before they fled in horror, or quote unquote, we don't really know, and moved to San Diego. Now, Brittany the Bad Girl is going to tell you about what the Lutz family allegedly went through. And I say allegedly because who knows?
Yeah. Well, I'll tell you, when George and Kathy Lutz bought this house, they brought in a Catholic priest to bless the house. According to the priest, and according to the movie that I watched, which was the one from 2005, he felt very cold in the sewing room. He heard voices telling him to get out and felt a slap on the face.
And we always have this mental image of like the voice always says, get out. In my mind, I picture like Bill Clinton saying, I think it's best if you leave as soon as possible. That would be, I'd listen to that voice.
I would listen to that voice. That's probably the only thing he ever would say that I would
I'd listen to, exactly.
Yeah. Well, in the 4 weeks that the family lived in the house, there were many, many alleged paranormal instances, such as flies, and I mean a lot of flies in the house, even in the winter. Now, the movie that I saw, there had to be hundreds of them, and they landed right on the priest's face and knocked him down off a ladder. Now, George, the husband, George Lutz, he woke up at around 3. It was actually 3:15 every morning, which was the approximate time that Ronald murdered his family. But every morning, 3:15, as soon as it flipped from 14 to 15, his eyes would automatically open. And George would look at his daughter Missy's window from the outside of the house, and he would see the head of a pig with glowing orange eyes.
Yikes.
Imagine that. And Missy had an invisible friend, a pig named Jody. Apparently, George observed instances where Missy was asleep and the rocking chair next to her bed was rocking. I guess if Jody's a rocking, don't come knocking. I remember that bumper sticker from the
Oh, yeah.
Now, George was also always cold and continuously stoking the fireplace. He allegedly saw demonic faces in the fireplace. This was supposedly regular. He also saw green slime on the walls. Now, on January 14th, 1976, the family fled the house 28 days after moving in, allegedly with just the clothing on their backs, and fled to California. What do you make of this, Benny?
Well, I can make a brooch. Never mind. I saw an airplane a couple of weeks ago. Stuck in my head. What do I make of this? I don't know. This is just me, but I smell a money grab here because by all accounts, and even by admission by his own kids, George Lutz was dabbled in the occult and he had his eye on the DeFeo house for quite some time after the murder, and he got the house for the bargain price of $80,000. And even though they fled, they were somehow unscared enough to come back later for a yard sale. So I'm sure they made a small fortune off the book, The Amityville Horror. And you said there was 2 movies, right? There was the original in '79 and the 2005 sequel.
Yes.
Okay, but I mean, I think this was a calculated maneuver by George Lutz, which, aside from traumatizing 3 young children, was a gold mine from a financial perspective. And I did, in doing the research for the podcast, his stepson, Chris Quarantino, maintained that many of the supposed paranormal events were either made up or embellished. And he called George Lutz a showman. So, that kind of tells you something. The couple divorced in 1980, just 5 years after moving into the house on Ocean Avenue. They're both gone. Kathy Lutz died of emphysema in 2004, and George died of heart disease in 2006. For the most part, the kids have remained silent. They've kind of been secluded. Wow. So, Brittany, I think I've been quite frank, and actually maybe that should be my new name instead of Benny. Should be Frank. What say you?
Yes, Frank, I agree.
You be frank and I'll be earnest.
So I would like to say, in a little bit of research that I did, I believe there are several other sequels. I think about 3 or 4 more movies that have the name Amityville in them. So, I mean, if he got paid for 2, he got paid for 5.
Yeah.
I mean, and the movie that I saw, which was the 2005 one, did not say anything at all about him knowing that there was a murder in the house prior. This movie showed the wife going to the husband and saying, "Oh, I don't know." And he said, "Look, houses don't kill people. People do.
Yeah.
We're all set. Don't worry about it."
Yeah, and like I said, I mean, they brought the priest in to bless the house. They knew full well what happened in that house.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
So, I mean, here's my question to anybody who's listening, and Brittany as well, is, would you, as a newlywed, and this is a common sense question, move your relatively brand new wife and 3 stepchildren to a house where you knew the previous residents were slaughtered? I mean, it may be just me, but I wouldn't have bought that house for $8, let alone $80,000. I just, in my mind, George Lutz knew exactly what he was doing, and he had no intention of staying in that house long term. What say you, bad girl?
Yeah, I agree. Now that I know this, I think it was definitely a cash grab. I do. I'm shocked by it. But then again, I've known some pretty awful people that would do something like that. So, hey, why not George?
And the funny thing is that nobody anybody who purchased it, because they gave up the house in 70, I think early 76.
Yeah.
And so that's 47 years ago, almost 48 years ago. And there's never been people living at a house right now. I mean, every time I've been back to Long Island, I don't know why. I'm just fixated. I always, whenever I'm back on Long Island, I always drive past that house.
Oh, so would I?
It's just, I mean, it looks, you would never know anything, I mean, abnormal happened. Of course, I mean, the murder definitely happened, and that was a horrific tragedy. But as far as everything else, I just, again, I have a very vivid imagination. Maybe the pig named Jody. I don't know. Maybe it's kind of a weird name for a pig, but
I agree.
Russell would be a good name for a pig, or Gregory, something like that. But
Penelope, it was a girl.
Yeah,
pig.
Exactly. Or Babe, something like that.
Yeah,
but, a lot of controversy here. But one thing that's not for debate is that Ronald DeFeo did murder his family, and he was most definitely a nut job. So that about wraps it up for another episode of True Crime with the Bad Girl and the Player. Bad Girl, any closing thoughts?
I'm shocked, and I hope that someday those children do speak out, because I would like to hear what they have to say. because the movie that I saw, George treated them very, very bad, especially the one named Chris. Very bad. And he also hatcheted the dog.
He what?
He killed the dog with a hatchet.
Why?
Voices told him to do it. Oh yeah, they showed it too. I had to turn away. Yeah,
he was not dealing with a full deck. I mean,
no,
but
no.
I mean, I do believe he was a man on a mission, and I mean, to a certain extent, mission accomplished. Although, I mean, yeah, maybe you made a few bucks, but you lost your family within 5 years, and you always had that cloud hanging over your head.
Yeah, definitely.
You're that guy, and you have to. I mean, people have to sleep at night. Now, if I step on an ant, I feel guilty. I can't imagine doing something like that.
Yeah, the family dog, I think his name was Harry, and he was the cutest little thing. He just went out there with a hatchet and hatcheted that dog. He went to the boathouse and did it. And I mean, never admitted it. He told the kids, I believe he ran away. And Chris spoke up. He spoke up to George quite a bit. And he said, he never runs away. What do you mean? So I hope someday they do come forward.
I mean, they have no vested interest unless they got paid off somehow, because they're not. I mean, they really have no affiliation with him anymore. The parents divorced. They were stepchildren. I mean, and it sounds like you said they didn't think very highly of him at all.
Yeah, he treated them pretty poorly, and he treated the mother. He was physically abusive to the mother as well during all of this, and that was supposedly the voices telling him what to do.
Right.
Sad.
What do you think? I mean, I think this crime, it's legendary status on Long Island. But I wonder if it might have been a little bit more obscure if it wasn't for the part with the Lutzes. I think they just added another layer to this horror, this tragedy that, and here we are 49 years later, still talking about it.
Yeah. And movies keep coming out and all that kind of stuff. And then there's other houses, there's one here in Rhode Island called the Conjuring House, so interesting stuff. I'll tell you, these weird houses. But
that's really funny, because there was a house, again, I grew up in Farmingdale. The next town over is Massapequa, with the home of Jerry Seinfeld, Alec Baldwin, the guy from the Stray Cats too, Brian Setzer. But there was a house that was inhabited by Wiccans, and I forget what we even called it, but again, like my younger brother, hey, can we drive past the witch house, and just to see if anybody was outside? People are we're fascinated by things that are different than us, whatever it is.
Definitely. I mean, I've lived in Rhode Island for 26 years, and I finally just last year went to the Conjuring House tour, and I sat there waiting for things to happen, and gotta tell you, nothing happened.
It was conjureless.
Conjureless, yeah.
Oh man, what a disappointment.
Well, for me it was. Now, they told us in one room, I went with my friend Matt, by the way, and Matt did have some things happen when he went upstairs. And he, he believed it all. He believed it all. And there was a group of, I think, 4 of us that all went together. And they told us, books usually fly off these shelves here in this room. So I stood there for about 10 minutes and waited. Nothing moved a millimeter.
Right.
And I just went, oh, this is ridiculous. So I don't know. I'm starting to wonder about these houses.
Yeah. I mean, they had another one. I mean, I watched probably 3 different documentaries on this case, and they had an actual friend of a childhood friend of one of the DeFeo girls. And there was supposedly, I mean, we didn't really cover this, but there was a hidden room, I guess, that George Lutz found.
Yeah.
That she said, oh, it wasn't a hidden room. We used to hang out there all the time. So just another, and I guess according to Lutz, the dog wouldn't go in there, and all kinds, dogs and cats living together, all kinds of drama. But, according to the girl, we used to go there. We used to hang out. We used to tell stories. Like, no big deal.
Yeah, and in the movie that I saw, it showed that he did find it, and it was all painted red.
Right.
Red paint inside. Come on.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think the son that called him a showman, I think he had it right on the money there.
Yeah, he had him pegged for sure.
So, well, that's another one, Bad Girl. And with that, on behalf of the Bad Girl, I am the player. Be safe and see you soon.
Thanks for watching.